This is the video for chapter 30. This chapter is culturally about weddings and grammatically about the perfect passive participle. So I just wanted to briefly look at the meat of the chapter before we go back to the grammar sections. So here in your vocabulary, you notice that you're going to have a few more parts to your verbs, your dictionary entries for your verbs. This is called the supine. And I'll get to what that means in a moment, but you'll notice when you look up a verb, now you will have four principal parts. Remember that the first principal part is your first person present. The second principal part is your infinitive form. The third principal part is your first person perfect. And now the fourth principal part is what's called a supine. This chapter, like I said, is about weddings, so you have some vocabulary related to that. Marry, wedding, of a wedding or nuptial, as well as chorus, gift, threshold, custom, most maiorum, the custom of our ancestors, and things of that nature. This chapter is pretty long, so what I have done is comprehension questions for this first story, the wedding of Horatia, and then I have given you the option. Here you have a very famous, part of a famous poem written by Catullus. They kind of summarize what the translation would be here if you want to take a look at that. This is supposed to be based off of a traditional wedding song, and that's kind of interesting. You don't have an assignment about that. It's just something to look at. The word building is more about the perfect passive participle. You've seen these as the form of adjectives. So paratus, you've translated before as ready. Technically, it's from paro. It means having been prepared. Teritus, from terio, having been terrified or simply terrified. Doctus, learned, means literally having been taught. Notus, known, having been learnt. Nuptius, married, so we get bride or wife from that. The neuter of a perfect passive participle is often used as a noun. So a dictum, we have that word, a dictum in English. So a saying, which is a thing having been said, literally. A factum, a deed, a thing having been done. Usum, order, a thing having been ordered. Promissum, promise. Scriptum, writing. Notice these are all neuter, so they're all things. You have a choice in your assignment. I have set up a close exercise for you about this story. Res Publica in Curriculum Linnet. A close exercise gives you part of the translation, and then you supply the rest of the translation in the blanks. You can choose to do that, or you can choose to translate some lines from this fabella about the wedding. So that is up to you. Obviously, weddings is going to be the cultural assignment. If in the extra credit you would like to write about your impression of Roman weddings, or you'd like to compare Roman weddings to weddings in your culture, that would be a perfectly acceptable extra credit assignment. Okay, let's take a look at the grammar. So the first thing we need to look at is the difference between active voice and passive voice. Everything you have had so far in Latin has been in the active voice. Perhaps you've heard your English teachers talk about writing in the active voice and trying to avoid the passive. English tends to think that the passive voice is weak writing, like if you're in journalism, you are not basically allowed to write in the passive voice. So Latin doesn't really, Latin is a little more nuanced as far as the voices go than English is. Everything you've met so far is active, wherein the subject is performing the action of the verb. So Quintus calls Marcus, Scintilla leads Horatia. In the passive voice, the subject is acted upon. So here, we're just going to flip it. Marcus is called by Quintus. Horatia is led by Scintilla. Notice these by phrases. What is in the by is doing the action. So Marcus is receiving the action of being called by Quintus. Horatia is receiving the action of being led by Scintilla, but because the voice is passive, Horatia and Marcus are the subjects, so they would be nominative in Latin. When I was teaching English composition, a way I would try to explain this is if you can add by zombies to the sentence, then the sentence is passive. So Marcus is called by zombies, that would be passive. Quintus calls Marcus by zombies, that doesn't really make sense, so that would be active. If that is helpful for you, you can go ahead and take it. If it's not, don't worry about it. So the first thing we're gonna do is 30.1, rewrite the following English sentences in passive form. So for example, this is active. Brutus killed Caesar. The passive form would be Caesar was killed by Brutus. Notice that they've just flipped the active and passive. They flipped the subject and the verb. No, one more time. They have flipped the subject and the object. So the captain gave the signal. How would we flip the subject and the object there? You could say the signal has been given by the captain, wherein the signal is the recipient of the action. The sailors cast off the ship. We would just flip it. So the ship was cast off by the sailors. 3, the sailors rowed the ship out of the harbor. So the ship was rowed by the sailors out of the harbor. That sounds weird. Number 4, the storm frightened all the passengers. The passengers have been frightened by the storm. Excuse me, all the passengers have been frightened by the storm. And number 5, but the captain saved the ship. So the ship was saved by the captain. So you're just flipping the subject and the object. Okay, so for some reason, in every Latin textbook I've ever seen, they give you this perfect passive participle before actually teaching you passive verbs. Whatever, it's fine. And like we said, we have seen a lot of them in the form of adjectives. And that's pretty much what it is. So like aperitus, paratus, commotus, teritus, and desertus are all technically perfect passive participles, but we translate them as if they were adjectives. And they function pretty much like that because, as you can see, their endings, us, a, are going to be the same as just a regular first or second declension ending. They were telling you that it is formed from the supine of the verb, and the supine is technically that fourth principal part. They're not going to go over this until the Blue Book, part 3. Do not worry about what a supine is. It is okay. It's not that common. Do not worry about it. It's not on your final. Don't worry about it. The perfect passive participle is formed by changing the final M of the supine to S. Don't worry about it. It's fine. It's okay. You can just pretend that this that fourth principal part is a neuter, and then you know that the us and a are going to be your endings for masculine and feminine, and that's perfectly fine to conceive of it like that at this point. Do not worry about the supine. In the following examples, notice that the participle agrees with the noun to which they refer in number, gender, and case, just like an adjective. So number 1, Aeneas, having been warned by Mercury, prepared the ships. So having been prepared is going to be the literal translation for doing a perfect passive participle. Dr. Cape will probably want you to do that for a while. I know that's just how my brain does it. If you want to leave off that having been whatever to make more sense to you, that is fine. Just indicate the perfectness by still retaining the ed. So you could say just Aeneas, warned by Mercury, prepared the ships, and that is fine. Number 2, they all ate the dinner prepared by Scintilla. You could say they all ate the dinner having been prepared by Scintilla. So notice that kenam agrees with paratom. They are both feminine and accusative and singular. In this case, paratom you could conceive of it like an adjective agreeing with kenam. The dinner prepared by Scintilla. Number 3, the centurion led the soldiers captured in battle to the general. So which soldiers? The soldiers that had been captured. So hostes and koptos agree in number, gender, and case. So they are plural and masculine and accusative. Again, koptos is functioning just like an adjective agreeing with hostes. In the translation is where you are indicating the passivity or the passiveness, that they had been captured and they're not the ones doing the capturing. Number 4, the consul said this, or these things, to the soldiers having been called together. So notice that militibus convocatis is dative to the soldiers having been called together, and it is plural and it is masculine as a phrase. Number 5, Marcus saw Quintus in the street and led him to a pub. Or when Marcus saw Quintus in the street, he led him to a pub. Okay, literally Marcus led Quintus having been seen in the street to a pub. The literal way is the way that you can convey that you understand that visum agrees with quintum, that they are accusative and masculine and singular together, and that visum is passive. So Marcus saw Quintus, having seen Quintus in the street, led him to a pub. Nope. Marcus led Quintus, having been seen in the street, to a pub. Sorry, I need to make sure that that's passive. So that's where the having been can help you. Having been whatever indicates that it is passive. Having been captured is passive. Having captured is active. So the been is indicating that it's passive. Okay, nota bene 1. In the last three examples, Latin and English idioms differ. English often uses a clause where Latin uses a participle. And that's fine if you translate it like that. You must grasp the sense of the Latin and express it in natural English. Nota bene 2. A or ab, by is always used with people / agents, but not with things or instruments. And that's kind of what we talked about when we were talking about ablative stuff. So the soldier wounded by an enemy, you've got ab hostibus, which is nice, because that's a straight up indication that you've got something that's passive. But in the second example, the soldier wounded by a spear, the hosta does not have a preposition, but it is in the ablative case as indicated by that long mark over the A. Okay, I'm going to switch over to our Word document to do some examples for your assignments. Okay, we talked about these. 30.1, change to passive voice. I'm not going to write those down. 30.2, what do the following words mean? And say what each verb comes from. Okay, let's do a few of these. So again, these are all coming from the fourth principal part of the verb. So vocatus comes from voco, vocare, vocavi, vocatum. So if it is your perfect passive participle, what would that mean? Remember that voco means call, so your perfect passive participle is going to be having been called. Cherry juice. Oh, I spelled it wrong. Comes from Terry O, which let's look it up. Yeah. So Terry O. Lost my place. Terry. That's going to be a second conjugation because it is a long ERE. Terui is the perfect, and teritum is the supine. So it means terrify. So our perfect passive participle will be having been terrified. You're not going to see that verb too much in that active. Custoditus is going to come from custodire, custodio, I believe. Let us look up the proper spelling. Yes, custodio. Custodio, custodio. dire, which is fourth conjugation. Custo dire is the perfect, and then custoditum is the supine. So our perfect passive participle will be translated as having been guarded. Again, by zombies or by something. And excitatus comes from excito. Excito, excitare. Right, let us check just to be sure. Yeah. Excitare. Excitali. Excitatum. As the supine. So then the perfect passive participle is going to be exki. Oh, yeah, well, they give it to you. In English, will be having been aroused or woken up. Having been woken up. Okay. So again, these supines have M on the end. You can just think of that as a neuter, so that you understand that it's a first or second declension adjective over here. So excitatus, having been woken up by zombies, by whatever. You're indicating the passivity with been. The perfect form is in the having, the passive form is in the been. Okay, now we're just gonna straight up translate the sentences. Number 5. Number 5 is the sentence that is on your quiz. So Horatia and Sponsata go together. They are both nominative and feminine and singular. So Horatia, that's our perfect passive participle, having been betrothed to Decimus, parawit ad nuptiae, or se parawit ad nuptias, prepared herself, it's a reflexive verb, for her wedding, for her nuptials, however you want to render that. Number 6, so here sponsata was your perfect passive participle. It's agreeing with Horatia. Horatia having been betrothed to Decimus. Again, having been betrothed, she's not the one doing the betrothing, right? She's betrothed by her father to Decimus. That's sort of understood in that sentence. It would be nice to have the ablative form so that we can practice that, but the book doesn't give you that. Oh well, thanks book. Okay. Number 6. Parimi amici, so many friends. Vocati is going to be our perfect passive participle, just like vocatus up here. So many friends having been called to the wedding. They, what did they do? Let's find a main verb. They sumserent. They ate, they dined to the wedding. Let's just say ate. Ate a cena magnificam, a magnificent dinner. Paratam, a scintilla. So you've got an a, which indicates to you that you have something that's passive. So you've got paratam modifying kenam. So a magnificent dinner prepared by scintilla. You could put having been in there, that's fine. Okay. But you have been doing paratam to this point as just prepared, as if it were an adjective. That is perfectly acceptable. The having been part is understood. And the passivity is in there indicated by. Moving on, 30.4, we're going to translate into natural English. Ooh, that sounds exciting. Okay, so we have Scintilla in the nominative. Can I ever type her name right? I don't know. Scintilla. It looks like we're missing a main verb. Let me just check my transcription. Oh yeah, I just didn't finish typing that sentence. Escutatam ad nutas. Nutias. Se parare. You said. Dyslexia. Okay. So literally, you have Horatium and Escutatum. Escutatum, sorry. Going together, Excutatum is going to be your perfect passive participle, just like Excutatus up here, and it's going to modify Horatium. So Scintilla, early in the morning, Mane. Having woken up Horatia. That's going to be a literal. We'll do it that way and then talk about it. Having woken up. No, let's leave off on that. She ordered Horatia. Yeah. Having been woken up. There we go. To prepare herself for the wedding. Okay. So this is literally how you could do it. Having been woken up. Natural English, you could do, how could you do that in natural English? My brain automatically wants to do the having been. So Scintilla ordered Horatia, who was awake, or Horatia, who already was awake, something like that. You can kind of play around with it and see what makes sense, as long as you're indicating that it's that it's perfect, so that that time difference with the other verbs is still maintained. Okay, number 5. Got documents, doing some crap. What was I doing when I typed these? Just like, let's leave off some verbs. Okay, cool. Super, ancestry lit. Okay. So, Jaganus. All right, okay. Having led Horatia, having been led to the new house, he lifted her over the threshold. So Jaganus lifted Horatia. Having been, oh my goodness. Having been led to the new house over the threshold. So you could say Decimus lifted Horatia, or after leading Horatia to the house, Decimus lifted her over the threshold. You could do something like that. You can make it a deponent clause, and that would be okay. Moving on, 30.5. Okay, now we're going to write some perfect passive participles, and then we're going to translate. So this first verb is scribere. So how would you find the perfect passive participial form of scribere? You would look it up in the glossary, which I will do right now, so that I will not spell anything incorrectly. So obviously, you can just look at the fourth principal part. So You got scribo, scribere, scripsi, and scriptum. Scriptum is the fourth. So let's figure out what it's modifying. So after a few days, I ordered you to read a book having been written by Plato. So we've got book, the book having been written by Plato. So scriptum needs to agree with librum. And then what case number and gender is librum? Let's look up the gender really quickly because I cannot remember. Liber is going to be masculine. Okay, so it is masculine. Librum obviously is going to be accusative and singular. So we can just leave it as scriptum librum. So after a few days, after a few days, I ordered you to read a book written by Plato. Okay, so again, the written by is the perfect passiveness of it all. You've got the which indicates that you've got some passivity here. You could say having been written, that would be fine. Number 5. Oh, this teacher is mad at these kiddos. So we've got ducere, which is going to agree with omnes here, it looks like. Oh man, these kids are bad. So let's look up ducere to find the supine form, because that's what we're going to use to make a perfect passive participle. So we've got duco, ducere, duxi, and ductum. Ductum was our 4th principal part. So scarcely any of you read this book. They did not do their assignment. Oh no. All having been led into the tavern, the bar, the inn, the whatever, into the bar by our old friend Marcus Cicero. All, I guess you could say you all having been led to the bar by Marcus Cicero waste time drinking wine. So instead of doing their assignment, they went to the bar. Surely no Austin College student would ever do such a thing. So ducatum is going to agree with omne. So what do we need to make it in order to agree? So omnes is going to be nominative and plural. And it's a group of boys, so it's going to be masculine. So nominative, plural, masculine is going to be ducti. Remember, omnes is 3rd declension. Ducti is going to be 1st or 2nd. So this is masculine, plural, nominative, just so you know. So it's accusative, singular, masculine as well. Okay. Okay, so you're looking up things. You're looking up your verbs. You're looking for the 4th principal part, which technically is the supine, but that is where your perfect passive participle comes from. And then you are making it agree with the noun and case number and gender. All right, we are going to translate these 2 sentences into English. So the sailors, ordered by the captain, cast off the ship. Cool. So what's our word for sailors? The nautai. Nautai looks like it's feminine, but it's not. Nautai. Ordered by the captain, so we would need some form of Eubeo. So it's going to need to agree with sailors. So we've got eusum is the fourth principal part. It needs to be nominative and plural and masculine. So UC by the captain. So he's a person, so we can use our preposition. What are we using as our word for captain? Just using magister. Okay, that's fine. So we're gonna make it ablative. Ordered by the captain, cast off the ship. I think they will use salvo for cast off. Let us look up the third principal part of salvo. Yes, it's salvi. So solvent cast off the ship will need to be singular and accusative. Okay. And number 4, Scintilla quickly read the letter written by Quintus. Scintilla is our subject. Quickly, color return, read legate, the epistulum written by Quintus. Okay, so epistulum is going to be accusative and feminine and singular. So written, we're going back to wherever it was up above, scriptum. So this will be scriptum to agree with epistulum. And then you've got another person. So we've got Quintus. So Quinto. Remember, you're going to use ob if the word that comes next is going to be a vowel, starts with a vowel. So Scintilla quickly read the letter written by Quintus, or the letter having been written by Quintus. Okay, so again, you're looking at the glossary, your dictionary entry for the fourth principal part. Technically, it's the supine. Don't worry about what the supine means. That's where your perfect passive participle is coming from. It has to agree with the noun that it modifies in case, number, and gender, just like an adjective, because it's functioning precisely like an adjective, but it's just called a perfect passive participle. If you need to break it off into its own deponent clause in English to make it make sense, please do so. I would caution you against making it a separate main verb, just because that's going to indicate that you don't know the difference between a participle and a main verb, and that might become an issue later on down the road. So make sure that the participialness is maintained. Okay, so this chapter is long. Please look over this video again or in chunks, because as you're doing the grammar, because the grammar is kind of broken up this time. If you have any questions, let me know.